Never have I been more excited for a video project than this. For the first time on this entire channel, I will show you guys an entire story arc. In this adventure, I want to convey the problems of comparison and self-doubt, alongside the weight of expectations. Here is Null Genesis Awaken. The movie begins, and yes, this is a movie, not like an actual series. This is a single movie. The movie begins flashing through the events of the last arc, which is the Clash of the Multiverse arc, which I cannot show here, and explains why Lexa and the others have been separated, which again I cannot show you. Then we cut to the next scene, which is a person waiting on an open field when suddenly a ship comes crashing down. Once the smoke dissipates, one figure exits the spaceship that just landed, and the figure who was waiting walks up to him and starts to talk. The figure who just exited the ship cracks a smile and says it is done, and that they have to just wait 8 months. And the figure who was waiting smiled and said that their side of the project was a smashing success, and now they just have to wait. 3 months later, we see a scene of an open field. There, Oren's hands lay folded and waiting. We see a figure jumping from tree to tree as Oren follows the movements. Then the figure goes out for an attack, but Oren counters with a kick. The figure reveals to be a small boy, who dodges the kick and goes in for another attack. Oren raises his arms in defense and knocks the boy back into a bundle of rocks. Oren quickly checks the boy, asking if he's okay. The boy answers that he is okay, and then Oren says that they should take a break. The boy then pulls out a bottle of water and hands it over to Oren, who thanks it and drinks it. The boy's name is revealed to be Korra, a reincarnation of one of the gods Arisa killed back in one of her own stories. Korra then jumps up and asks whenever Arisa's gonna actually train him like she promised, and Oren just looks confused. He then asks if Arisa wasn't training him. Korra says she wasn't, and Oren says something underneath his breath and just says he will go talk to her. Then Oren checks on his watch and tells Korra it's time to go to school, and that they will finish the training later. Korra nods and picks up his bag and starts to run. Oren waves until Korra leaves his view, and then flies over to the big castle at the center of the new flourishing Tempest City. He then goes to a side of a certain window, and he stops at the windows and peers inside, seeing Arisa sitting on a desk writing on a piece of paper. Oren slashes the window to quickly gain Arisa's attention, and then when Arisa notices, she gets up from her desk and walks over to the window and opens it. She then greets Oren, asking what's wrong. Oren shouts at Arisa for not fulfilling her promise of training Korra, and Arisa just twitches in annoyance. Arisa said that she could train Korra later, and that she made a promise to the city to take care of it, and it's taking longer than she thought. Oren just sighs and asks if Arisa trained during the last year, and Arisa just responds, "Why?" Oren turns around and asks, "Excuse me?" as Arisa repeats, "Why?" Oren brought up the possibility of what if a villain shows up and Arisa isn't enough to defeat it due to her lack of training, and Arisa just responds that they have much more competent and stronger people to defeat the threat. Oren reminds her that she is a member of the team as well, but Oren just says she could never contribute as much as anyone else, and Oren just sighs and starts to fly away. Arisa turns and asks him to pick up Korra today as well, as Oren responds, "I will," before flying off. He then goes back to the fields and then lands on a nearby mountain. He assumes a sitting position and just meditates to train. Behind Oren, however, a blast gets sent towards him, and when it hit him, it explodes into a cloud of smoke. Once it dissipates, Oren is revealed to be standing perfectly fine. He looks up and questions who dares to attack him while meditating, and the figure who attacked him announces his presence. He says that his identity doesn't really matter. Oren looks at the patch on his shirt and says that it is one of the patches of the deceased gods Arisa killed a while back, and deduces the person is a robotic being due to Oren's inability to sense the robot. The figure is surprised he could piece all of that together in such a short time frame, and just says he is here to test his abilities on a decent fighter that this Earth has to offer. Oren just says he will gladly send him back where he came from, busted and destroyed, and the figure just charges in and punches Oren in the gut. who tries to overhead the figure, who just jumps back and kicks back, kicking him on the shoulder. He then jumps down and punches him on the gut again. Orin gets up and throws his heavy-weighted clothing off and then charges in. The figure just elbows Orin in response and kicks him away. Then he throws him into a mountain and fires a barrage of energy blasts. Orin, by the way. The figure evades with ease, jumping up and charging a blast of his own, firing it at Orin, which explodes in a tremendous fashion. The figure scans the area but cannot seem to detect any of Orin's heartbeat or signature, I guess. And because of this, he just assumes he burned him to the ground to his very atoms. Orin, however, was just further away, being able to escape the blast in time. Orin follows the figure, and due to him not finding him, sensing him during the follow, he assumes that he isn't equipped with any power locator and is sensing life signatures instead. So after some time of him following the figure, he lands near a hole in the ground, and after seeing the figure go through the tunnel, he takes down a nearby bodyguard and takes his uniform to blend in, and enters the base, which shows a giant circle structure hidden underground, which Orin was just examining the structure when he saw the figure enter a building, and Orin follows immediately. The robot eventually stops at a room and enters with Orin behind him, a person sitting on the sofa with 10 guards behind him. He greets the robot by calling him Celestial Mark II. Number 2 thanks him and walks over to a similar-looking robot who is addressed as Celestial Mark I. Number 2 presses a button which turns on communications between a man whom Orin has never seen before, as they talk about Number 2's performance against Orin. The man says, if that's all Earth has to offer, then defeating Arisa will be a joke. Maybe they won't have to use him after all. Number 2 says they have no chance of beating him, and the man sitting on the sofa asks if they should go after Arisa next. The man agrees and asks how they were gonna bring Arisa to them. Then one of the, workers, bosses, whatever, one of them brings up Korra and brings up the idea of kidnapping them. So the two men agree, and so a team is assembled to go kidnap Korra and bring him to the base to quickly lead Arisa here. Orin quickly says that he knows the kid, so he should be vital to the success of the mission. And the man asks how he would know Korra, and Orin just quickly retorts that he has a kid going to the same school, and he saw Korra being picked up by Orin on multiple occasions. They then agree to make preparations and accept Orin into the team to be here on the day in a day to do the mission. So they have to prepare for a day, since they need to get the base ready so these planet busters don't destroy the entirety of the base while fighting. All the soldiers then get dismissed and Orin leaves. Afterwards, he uses super speed to quickly leave the base and flies over to Arisa in a jiffy. Orin thinks this is a good way to make Arisa learn the importance of training and, not being weak. Afterwards, he scratches on Arisa's window again, and Arisa asks what he wants after opening the window. Orin asks about the potential unlock ability she used back when she first got her divine form during one of her adventures, and Arisa says she got that from the spirit of the old gods. Orin asks if he can get his potential unlocked, and Arisa just says she can give it a try, but then she asks why. Orin says so he can catch up to Lexa in some way or another, since his training methods has been doing nothing. Arisa just tells him to come with her, and she leads him to an empty room. They both sit down and face each other and meditate, entering the plane of the gods. Arisa calls out into the vast void, and a giant cat comes out asking, "Who calls?" and then looks down and says, "Oh, it's just Arisa." He asks what Arisa's wish is, and Orin just asks if he can awaken Orin's potential, and the spirit says he can, with ease. The spirit's eyes glow, and Orin's potential gets unlocked, shooting his power to rival Lexa's ultimate form at the time. Orin is astonished by the power, and Arisa just makes a door and tells him it's time to leave, but Orin just says he's gonna test his powers here, and Arisa just says okay, and says to open the door and walk out when he wants to, and Arisa leaves. The spirit looks down and asks what Orin wishes to speak with him about, and Orin just looks back and asks if Arisa is struggling with anything, and the spirit just replies that he wishes he knew. Then Orin asks about Arisa's parents. The spirit says they are in heaven, of course, but Orin retorts that her real parents. The spirit looks down and answers that they've been trying to contact Arisa, but something is blocking them from contacting her. Oren begins to think, and then the spirit says Orisha needs time off, at the very least, and Oren agrees, leaving the room and going over to Orisa, who looks up and asks how his newfound power is. Oren says it's great, and then shoots the pen Orisa was holding out of her hands, and says that now is not the time for that. Orisa looks up annoyed and says, yes it is. But Oren just says that he will help her later. Right now, all she needs right now is a break. Orisa sighs and stands up and walks to the door, but then stops. Then she turns around and looks at Oren, who is confused, asking why she isn't leaving, but Orisa just responds that she is waiting for him. Oren looks even more befuddled, but when Orisa told him to hurry up, he snapped out of it and walked over to Oren. They both walk alongside the streets of the city as they talk. Oren talks about Korra's progress, and Orisa asks questions about what they've been learning to that point. Oren tells her maybe it's time for her to teach Korra, and she just says, I don't know if I can do it as well as you do. Oren then stops Orisa from moving forward, and she comes to a stop onto Oren's arms. She looks towards him and asks, what are you doing? Oren just says, I want to show you something. Oren leads Orisa down the road, which reveals to be a street full of cats. Orisa's face lights up at this, and Oren notices. They both walk over to the cats, and Orisa quickly befriends one. While Oren's chosen cats leave, Orisa chuckles a little bit, and Oren looks towards Orisa and says, I guess I'll have to find another cat, and starts to pet Orisa, who was shocked at Oren's action, but he quickly just plays it off. Oren then points at a noodle shop and asks if she wants to eat, and Orisa just nods. They both sit and order some, and after receiving some food, they both start to eat, and both divulge in a conversation. Orisa asks about news of Lexa, and Oren just says he doesn't know. And then they move on to better conversations about what Oren has been training about, and the different things that are happening in Tempest City. After some time of being in the shop, chatting, eating, they both leave the shop. Orisa then looks up at Oren and asks where he's staying tonight, and Oren just says, in a field near a shack he's built. Orisa is quite surprised and is appalled. Someone with his power and position is living there of all places, and Orisa just asks if he wants to stay at the castle, and Oren accepts. After all, it was better than that shack he built. Later, Orisa goes to school to pick up Korra, and once Korra exits the building and sees Orisa, he just lights up in joy and hugs her, who hugs him back, apologizing to him that she's been so busy. And then they both walk off. Once they reach close to the castle entrance, Korra sees Oren standing there, looking at them, waiting, and Orisa just tells him that he is staying with them for now. Korra just looks at Orisa and then at Oren, and then says he knows Orisa's secret, and Orisa looks shocked and looks at him, stuttering what he means. He just lets go of Orisa's hands and runs into the castle. Oren looks confused and looks over at Orisa, and he just says asking what he said to get Orisa that red, and Orisa just shakes it off, saying he was spouting bogus. So they walk in, they have dinner, where Orisa asks about his school day and what he's been doing with Oren, and having fun after that. Later, when they were preparing for bed, Korra trusts all the other vacant rooms, and Orisa just asks if he wants to sleep with her. Oren looks at her very confused, asking if she was sure, and Orisa just says yes. Oren then accepts the offer with a little bit of embarrassment. Later at night, Oren was unable to sleep due to being so close to Orisa, when suddenly Orisa turns over and asks if Oren was still up. Oren was surprised by this, and turns around too, seeing Orisa staring back at him with a serious eye. Oren's embarrassment quickly fades after seeing this, and he asks what the problem is. Orisa just responds by asking him how he sees her, and Oren just says that she's a strong, reliable, and caring goddess. Orisa smiles a little and says that she senses that Oren is coming up to her strength, and asks if she deserves to be with the stages of being powerful, with being so powerful as Lexa and Rita, who both displayed huge levels of power at the tournament. Orisa stands up and consoles Orisa, telling her that she is a strong character in of herself. While Lexa and the others may grow at an absurd rate, everyone else is different. Orisa opens her arms with which indicates a request for a hug. Oren hugs her, then pets her on the head, telling her she's deserving to be of her position on the group. The next morning, Oren wakes up to see Orisa is still sleeping. It seems that after their chat last night, they both had a better time sleeping. Oren walks out of the room and closes it quietly and walks over to the desk and starts to fill out forms for Orisa. A couple of hours later, Orisa wakes up to check the time and is shocked to see how much time has passed from her sleeping. Arisa runs out to the desk to see all the papers filled up. Arisa quickly goes to the field to see Orin training Korra. Arisa lands on a nearby tree and sits down, watching them silently. Orin tries to make Korra flies. As he keeps trying, Arisa smiles and walks down, asking what's wrong. Orin responds, saying that Korra is struggling to do energy control and that he is a natural, so he doesn't know what to provide for him to understand what to do. Arisa smiles and does a little triangle shape with her hands and instructs Korra to push energy into the middle of the triangle shape on his hands. After a couple of tries, Korra succeeds, and Arisa tells him to make sure that the energy bowl is much bigger and shows what he should aim for. Korra continues to try, and Orin and Arisa just sit next to each other on a rock. Arisa turns to Orin and thanks him for the talk last night, and saying that it really helped her. Orin just says it's not a problem and that he would help her if anything was bothering her. Arisa smiles and continues to watch Korra as he succeeds into making a bigger energy bowl. Orin laughs and says instead of asking what would Lexa say, he should have thought of what would Arisa say, and Arisa laughs a little. Orin looks at her and Arisa just turns and stares back, asking why he's looking at her like that. And Orin just looks back to the first time she met Arisa. She quite literally never looked at him in the eyes, but now he was chatting with her like it was nothing. Arisa laughs a little and responds, yes, she was like that, wasn't she? Orin then interjects, saying she called him Whitehair for some times, not even using his real name, and Arisa just laughs out loud. Orin checks his watch and calls Korra, who formed an energy bowl that was almost the entire size of the triangle, that it is now time for him to go to school. Arisa says she can be the one to pick up Korra today, but Orin just says he got this. Arisa looks surprised, but says that he can be the one to do so. So, Arisa and Orin both depart in their separate ways, and Korra goes to school. Anyways, back at the plot, Orin is now waiting outside of school with another soldier to kidnap Korra. They see that Korra is leaving the school building, and the soldier walks up to him almost immediately, holding out his hand, saying to follow him. Korra immediately gut punches the man, and Orin runs over, and then Korra and Orin leaves, with Orin explaining that she could break out of her cuffs at any time. By the way, she recognized it was Orin by his energy. She may not be good at controlling it, but damn well can she sense it. Anyways, after getting a video of Korra acting scared, they go over to the castle as the soldier knocks on the door, but with no answer. Orin just calls the soldier to the nearby window and scratches on it again. Arisa opens it, asking who the hell they were and what they were doing there. Orin is surprised that Arisa isn't detecting his energy when Korra just minutes ago detected him without any trouble. The soldier tries to threaten Arisa with a gun, but it's knocked away easily. Without any other options, the soldier shows Arisa the video, and Arisa just looks at it with shock. Then the soldier starts to walk away when Arisa teleports right in front of him and starts to power up, going vivid and creating a hole, shouting at the soldier, what has he done with Korra? The soldier immediately starts to apologize and said he did nothing to the kid, and if she just comes with her, that they will just show Korra. And Orin slightly says to himself that yes, Arisa has returned. Once they reach to the underground base, Arisa quickly spots Korra, jumps out of the plane with Orin and the soldier in her arms. She lays them both down on the ground and starts walking towards Korra. When the android starts walking towards her, he charges in quickly, and Arisa just blocks number one's punch, asking who the hell he is. But the android just stays quiet. Arisa kicks number one away, and they both go in for an attack. And Arisa dodges the first punch and goes in for one of her own, which lands and knocks him down to the ground, but he just raises his whole body somehow and headbutts Arisa, who responds in kind. Number one throws her into the ground, shattering the ground beneath her feet. That doesn't sound right. As number one floats down, Arisa gets the rubble off of her and just asks why they are doing this, and they respond to stop a villainous god such as herself. And Arisa just looks surprised, and then they retaliate with the fact that she retaliates with the fact that they're the one who kidnapped the child. Number one announces that they promise not to hurt Korra, and Arisa charges in. But number one counters and knees Arisa in the chest as Arisa spits out blood and then knocks and then gets knocked back. Number 1 catches her legs and then throws her up into the air, bursting out of the floor, and Arisa quickly regains her footing and looks up, transforming into Vivid, boosting her power by what did I make it to be? I think it was 20 times? Yeah, 20 times. Arisa kicks number 1, repeatedly in the head and then uppercuts him, flying towards him and knocks him down to the ground. Number 1 just gets back up, and they continue to exchange blows until Arisa punches number 1 away, who goes in for a tackle, sending Arisa into one of the fire walls and crushing her between the rocks, and then just throwing her away. In response, Arisa threw daggers and then threw a blast at number 1, who dodged them all and shot a blast of his own, which Arisa knocks away by using both of their hands. They continue to clash down at the original spot where they began fighting, and it seems like they're pretty even, but number 1 is adapting as he fights, and he is slowly getting stronger than Arisa. Arisa and number 1 knock each other back, and Arisa goes in for an attack. Number 1 counters all the moves Arisa throws at him, knocking her off her feet and hitting her on the throat with a chop, and then grabs a hold of her face and throws it to a nearby rock. After getting the rocks off her, she hears a scream of Korra. Arisa quickly looks up and sees Orin in disguise, holding up Korra, and acting like he was holding him by the throat. Arisa screams out Korra's name as number 2 shouts to stop that, which confuses both Orin and Korra. Arisa starts to power up, and by doing so splits the roof that was on the cave, completely stopping the rain that they artificially placed there to make it more dramatic. Arisa now had transformed into a form that resembled her base form, but now her power was undetectable to a mortal. Arisa looked towards number 1 and kicked herself off the ground, letting a punch that number 1 guarded. However, the punch was so strong it caused number 1's guard to break, and Arisa started to pummel number 1 in the air, eventually knocking him down to the ground. Number 1 is getting annoyed and angry, and Arisa's power is just raising again and again. Arisa asks what evil god are they talking about, and number 1 just responds that it's her and shoots an energy blast, which Arisa gets angry about and knocks away, shouting, "Are you insane? What are you talking about?" Arisa talks about how they told him to kidnap a child and that shouldn't they be the bad guys? Number 1 was told to calm down by the female researcher that just happened to build him, and tells number 2 to enter the fight as well. And as he charges in, a blast stops him. Orin goes down and shouts that his fight is with him, entering his own ultimate potential awakened whatever form. Number 2 looks up and grins and flies straight up to Orin, who catches the fist and throws him away. Number 2 regains his footage as quickly as he can as Orin follows suit. Arisa looks surprised at Orin's appearance, and he just tells her not to worry, and we'll talk about this later and why he's here. Number 2 stands up straight and asks how Orin got this strong in that short of amount of time, and Orin dismisses it and just charges in. Orin jumps back as they clash fists and trade blows in the air, but number 2 eventually lands a punch on Orin's stomach, sending him flying back, realizing even with his latent potential being unlocked, he is still weaker than number 2. He stops falling down and connects a ton of bricks to make a bowl-like shape, which he throws at number 2, and then he goes off to the side and charges a Null cannon, and fires it at number 2, who forms a shield blocking the blast, sending it many different directions. While this is happening, number 2 and Orin talks about the orders and their misconceptions of Arisa being a bad goddess thing, and that their maker, a female researcher, has been giving orders with the blatantly wrong and biased information. Number 2 starts to get angry because of this disrespect that his maker is getting, but Orin asks maybe she was given false information by someone close to one of the old gods, maybe one of the gods' son. Number 2 just yells Orin to shut up as they continue to trade blows in the air. Number 2 gets knocked back with Orin's words ringing in his mind. He goes into a fury of attacks, of punches and kicks, knocking Orin down to the ground. He picks him up and throws him down to a cave nearby. Orin looks up at the light slowly fading from his view as he thinks, what would Lexa do? What would she do to win this? Maybe he could try get angry, let his emotions take the helm. Or maybe he could... Orin opens his eyes as a scarf forms around his neck. No, he would not ask what Lexa would do anymore. He would do as he would. Orin calms himself down and gets a cape. The back of his cape is branded with the Null logo, as his shirt gets extra hunting accessories that a hunter would normally carry. Quicker than anyone could pick up, Oren zooms up to the surface and goes behind number 2, who looks behind him and shouts, "What now?" going in for punches. But Oren just evades them all and hits number 2 in a certain spot on his neck. Number 2 falls as Oren kicks him straight down to the ground. The god's son begins to make his escape, but Korra breaks out of his binds and chases him down. The demigod pulls out a gun, but it's shot out of his hand before he could do anything. It was by number 2. The demigod screams at number 2, but all his answers back are just that he knows who the villains are. Oren walks over at Orisa, who is still in a fist clash but she just stops at the sight of Oren. Number 2 is going to attack Orisa, but number 2 just stops him. Number one tries to attack. Orisa continues to examine Oren as he powers down. However, on a distant moon, yes, that's right, moon, another demigod looks up at the tank, holding something in it. It looks like a figure, and then smiles. He goes to press a button, and back down on Earth, a portal opens on the giant circular structure that I mentioned earlier. Before anyone could do anything, they start to get pulled into a portal. Orisa quickly saves Korra from being pulled in and tells him to stay here and wait for them as they all get sucked into a portal, and then it closes. Now they were on the moon. It seems that circular structure earlier was a portal of some kind. Oren just is confused and asks how they breathe in space, and Orisa just shrugs and looks over at the building near the moon. Begins to walk towards it when suddenly a shot is fired through Orisa's shoulder. But instead of dealing damage to her, everything around her gets turned into the ocean, with her standing on a small piece of landmass. Orisa steps back in fear, and Oren went to snap Orisa out of it when suddenly a power shut up. Everyone could detect it, and a figure starts to walk out of the building. Oren and number 1 and number 2 look behind them as they see a monster with the energy of all the members of the Null Genesis in it. The thing looks up and shouts, "This is my welcome party. I must say, this is a very disappointed lineup. Where's Lexa, or Reina, or anyone actually powerful?" Oren goes into his potential unlocked state and number 1 and 2 gets ready for battle. Nezumi just suddenly arrives onto the scene and jumps down from the ship, ready to fight, as Condor does the same. They both sense the big energy that came from the moon and have come to help. And then they started battle. As they are battling, the androids reveal, number 1 and 2 reveal that this body was built with a weakness, and it was on top of its head, and that they just had to blast it. But it was all just shown to be hopeless. Nezumi and Condor try to keep the figure at bay, but he uses the abilities that number 1 and 2 had, like shields or just overwhelming power with long-lasting batteries. Oren and number 1 kicks the thing off his feet as number 2 fired a huge attack which reached its target on the bullseye, but once the smoke dissipated, the thing had no damage taken from the blast. Oren and the others stand completely in shock at what they're seeing right now. As Oren asks what the thing is, the thing responds, "Me? Well, I'm a reborn deity, a strongest of the one Orisa killed. And now I am a perfect god. Havoc." Oren and the others stare at the newly born god. Number 2 then comes to one conclusion and tells everyone to hold Havoc back. He flies up to the air and charges one last spectacular attack, using all the energy he has remaining. Cut to a scene. It's not the moon, that's for sure. It's just a man, clouted in full battle armor, in front of a building, looking quite bored. When he looks up for a second, he sees a shadow on the person on top of an extremely high wall near a river. So he goes up to the stairs on top of the wall and looks at a beautiful woman, who looks at the guard in surprise. As her shining purple eyes widen, she lost her footing and fell down the wall. The guard quickly reacts and catches the woman as she looks into his eyes, as he does with hers. He pulls her up and apologizes for scaring her, but she dismisses it, saying that it's her fault anyways. They both sit down at the edge of the wall and begin to talk. They introduce himself. The girl is a lower-class citizen known as Bella, and the man introduces himself as Azim, who works as one of the guard forces of the gods. They begin to talk to each other that entire night, with the full moon illuminating down upon them. Back at the fight, the others try to hold Havoc back as much as possible, but it's a losing battle since none of them are stronger. Number 2 goes down for his final attack, and Orin looks up and tells everyone to scatter, as Havoc looks up and smiles, but right before doing so, before hitting Havoc, Number 2 released all his energy that he had contained and charged up, which caused a panic for Havoc as he put his arms up in defense and created an energy shield as the struggle began. Either Number 2 was gonna lose all of his remaining energy, or Havoc's shield was gonna buckle. As the seconds tick by, Havoc's shield cracks bit by bit until Number 2 explodes with energy. The ground is covered by smoke, and Orin can't sense Havoc's energy anymore. Him and Bella then meet up back at the store, as they catch up over what happened in their lives since they last talked to each other. Azim passes a compliment about Bella, about her looks, and Bella smiles and thanks him, sending a compliment of her own back. They laugh as they continue to walk down the streets. Suddenly, an energy shot was fired at Orin, and the others dodged it quickly and looked over. Havoc was just hiding his energy from being detected. Havoc looked down at anger at Number 2's corpse and started to build up a blast. Orin shouted, "Don't you dare!" as he charged in, entering his newly acquired form, wrapping his scarf around Havoc's legs, sending him slipping, and they start to fight, trading blows evenly. We then cut to a bed. As Bella lies there, tired, with Azim next to her, Bella holds the baby in her arms and looks over at Azim, asking him, "What should we call her?" Bella asks. Azim looks at the baby and mutters one line, "Arisa." Orin continues to trade countless blows with Havoc, and Orin's power was growing every second they traded, closing that gap between him and Havoc, but that starts to annoy Havoc, who starts to lose his patience. Orin sends his scarf underground and wraps it around Havoc's legs and goes in for a stab of his vital points, which causes a hefty amount of damage to Havoc, which makes him even more enraged than he already is. As he breaks through Orin's scarf, Orin charges up a blast and lands it on Havoc's cheek, sending him back. At this point, it's a worthless struggle. Number 1 had gotten Number 2's body to his creator, who was on the moon, and coming back, Nezumi and Kondo was barely able to stand, and Orin himself couldn't grow fast enough to defeat this demon of a fighter. Orin looks over at Arisa as his one goal comes into his mind, to keep Arisa safe. So he charges in and throws a punch, but is pummeled by Havoc. Nezumi goes in but is swatted away, and Nezumi hits Kondo during his fall, which takes them both out of the fight. Orin is knocked down and grabbed by his feet and thrown right into the air. The next few scenes Arisa sees in her memories is just her growing up, with her family whom she has long forgotten about. She watches her mother, a personification of beauty, smile as Arisa takes her first step, with Azim grinning to himself while guiding Arisa, with her hair starting to grow out with the long purple color we all know her for. And then we see another scene, where Bella is holding Arisa and is waving goodbye to Azim, who is in his battle gear. Then a few months later, where in a rainy day, a knock appears on the door, whom Arisa hears and starts to walk towards the door. Bella grabs Arisa and opens the door to not see Azim, but another soldier who is in the same armor that Azim was in, holding Azim's own armor. Arisa says the word "dad" for the first time as tears roll down Bella's face. She collapses into the ground and starts to cry. Arisa tries to console her by patting her on the head, saying, "Mom, please don't cry. It's making me cry." Days later, while Arisa was sleeping, Bella was awoken by the noise. She looked outside and saw a massive collection of guards with spears and torches walking up to their house. As Bella assumed the worst, she threw off her clothing and got into her normal clothes. As in this world, well, I'm gonna create some bullcrap explanation here. Colored hair equals divinity, yes. And she quickly picks up Arisa and wraps her around her shirt, the suit that she is currently wearing. You know, the cat shirt, yeah, that one. putting her favorite cat ears on her head. I need some way to explain this. And she runs out of her house of the back door, straight into the forest that surrounded the town. As she hears the windows shatter as their house lights on fire, she looks back for a second and sees it. An old god with a wolf mask and claws standing near the soldiers. Bella lets out a little gasp, which the god quickly picks up immediately and starts sprinting towards Bella, swinging on tree branches and vines. Bella runs until she is breathing heavily as she looks down and takes cover near a ravine. She can't cross it. She would be caught and killed here. So she got on her knees and prays to the other gods to keep Orisa and her child, alive. And she throws Orisa into the waters below, but as soon as she threw Orisa, a claw went straight through her chest. Blood splattered onto Orisa's face, and as a tear rolls down Bella's eyes as she watched Orisa fall into the ocean below, hoping that she would make it through this. She fell into the ravine, following her child, when a splash echoes through the ravine. Orisa is carried away by the current, except Bella hits the floor, dying on impact. Orisa starts to cry, as if something told her that now she is alone. Then black. Orisa saw nothing but utter abyss, but she could hear something. Someone else at least. However, they all kept getting cut off before they could finish. Be a goddess of. Show them the power of the goddess of. But then a single voice cuts through everything, as Orisa sees another distant memory. It's her staring up at her father, who died within battle. And he just says, I want you to be able to give justice to the people who cannot. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Be the hero you want to be, Orisa. It was his last words he said to Orisa before leaving and then perishing. When Orisa found out she was a god, she never knew what type of god. She could never truly evolve because of this blockade of her memory, because of what she never knew herself to be. The reason Orisa was afraid of water was because of this event, this day, this experience. While Orisa lost the memories of that day, her body never forgot. Orisa looks down in the water and she finally knew the one thing that's been haunting her from the beginning, her real parents' identity. A tear rolls down from Orisa's eyes as she looks through the memories of her parents, the way they smiled, the way they cared, even right till to the end of their lives. As long as Orisa got the chance of surviving, that gave them hope. Right now, she didn't care about anyone. Reina, Lexa, or even Zoe. All that mattered was, suddenly a figure just bursting out of the water. It was Orin, all tattered and bruised, bleeding and hurt. Orisa took a step forward when out of the water a beam went and hit Orin straight in the body, seemingly disintegrating him. Silence. Orisa was frozen, looking up where Orin emerged for just a second, just to be destroyed in front of her. Then Orisa's eyes broke. Her power went completely down to zero as her god energy shot up. Now there was nothing holding her back, no memories to hold her back. As Orisa opened her eyes again, she had now truly ascended to be a goddess of justice. Orisa finally figured out who she was. Back when she first acquired this divine power, she knew she was a goddess, but didn't really know what type of goddess she was. But now she could truly access that power. Orisa walks down into the water with no fear, and she went deeper and deeper. Havoc was stunned in silence, seeing as this overwhelming power starts to walk towards him. Havoc just screamed and then threw a punch, but Orisa just tanked him, hitting him in the gut and uppercutting him. Havoc took a couple steps back, clutching his, chest and gut. Orisa sees something fall down behind her, and as she sees Orin alive and on him, number 2. He had just made it back in time to protect Orin from that blast. Orisa sighs in relief, and Havoc looks at Orisa with pure rage as he starts to charge a null blast to destroy Orisa and the entirety of the earth. Orisa just stands there staring at Havoc and starts to charge and attack herself. Orin looks towards Orisa and is surprised by her charging motion, with it being so similar to his null cannon charge. Havoc realizes if he clashes with a blast of that magnitude, he will surely lose. So he flies up to make his getaway, but is stopped for 5 seconds by a barely standing Nezumi. Orin then wraps his scarf around his body and holds him down, Condor doing the same, with number 1 helping Orin hold Havoc down. Havoc saw his life flash before his eyes as he fired a beam to try at least save his life. And Orin just smiles and fires off her own blast. The Tempest Beast Cannon, the variation of the Null Cannon which was used by Orin, which shatters Havoc's blast, completely disintegrating him and saving the Earth. Orisa looks up in disappointment and then collapses, with Orin going to catch her quickly before she fell. Number 2 brings his creator and the lifeless body of number 1. Number 2 brings his creator and lifeless body of number 1, with Condor and Nezumi holding each other in their arms. Orin thanks them for their contribution in this fight, and they all say it was mostly Orisa's fight, as they stare at the unconscious and tired Orisa. They then return all to Earth, and Orin picks up Korra, who had just beaten the entire army while waiting since she got bored. Hours later, Orisa just wakes up and looks at Orin standing there at the foot of her bed. Orisa walks up to Orin asking how long she was out, and Orin just responds a few hours. Orisa thanks him and they walk out together. Korra is the first to see them and points out they're holding hands. Orisa looks down and realizes what's happening and looks at Orin, asking if he's fine with this. And he just says he is. Condor and Nezumi walks up to them and they start to talk when the female researcher walks up to them and thanks them for the defeat of Havoc and deeply apologizes. But Orisa just shrugs it off and asks if she wants to work for her, since they need a little bit more of their talent in her own little royal army. And the female scientist quickly accepts it, bowing to her, who just says that's a bit excessive. Orisa then walks up to the roof to gather her own thoughts, as Orin follows, asking why she's up here. Orisa says it's because she finally knows who she is, and one of her own major flaws thanks to this whole debacle. And Orisa just smiles. Maybe she was comparing herself to others a little too much. Orin goes on his knees randomly and asks, I like you. Will you go out with me? Orisa quickly looks behind her in shock, losing her footing and falling, but Orin quickly catches her as they both stare into each other's eyes. Orin pulls Orisa back up and Orisa just answers, gladly. That was it. That was the movie. It's quite long. This video is quite long. That was the story of Orisa and Orin. I'm probably going to state this earlier, but this is inspired by Dragon Ball Superhero. So go ahead and give that a watch if you haven't yet. This is one of my favorite arcs to have come up on this entire bit of story, and will always be one of my favorites. Thank you guys for waiting on this video. The Clash of the Multiverse arc may not come, actually. I may just tackle a different arc, because that is much too much drawing and fighting for me. Thank you, Dragon Ball, for the inspiration, and thank you, Toriyama, for everything you've created.
Ah.